Next, we want to add quotes to the block quotes that are in the aside section. And to do that, we're going to learn a couple of new CSS properties and use some pseudo elements, which are a little bit different than pseudo classes. So the first property that we're going to learn is the quotes property. And the quotes property allows us to specify what is going to be used for the open and closing quotes. And here let's look at the example of what these look like. So when we set the quotes property, we're really saying what to use for the first string says what to use for the opening quote. The second string says what to use for the closing quote. And then the third one is what to do in a nested quote. So the third and fourth properties are the opening and closing quotes to use for a nested quote. And so there we see that option. And also notice that you can use either if your keyboard and your editor lets you use these characters, you can put the characters directly in. If not, you can use the entity number. So, and you're not limited to the only ones here. You can use other entity properties or keyboard characters that you want to use. So this gives an example. This one only specifies 2 characters, so those will be opening and closing quotes, whether they're nested or not. You have to do 4 to get 2 pairs for the outer quotes and the inner quotes for nested. And you can do a third pair, and that would be if there's a quote nested inside a quote, nested inside a quote. So let's go ahead and add some quotes. And the ones that we're going to add are these curly quotes, the 201C and the 201D. And we're going to do this in the aside block quote, and we already have a place for that. So if we just say quotes, that's the property, and then we're going to add an opening quote, which is start with the backslash, 201C, and then the next one we just put a space. Again, we put it in quotes, and we do the backslash, 201D, and then we save it. And now if we go back and refresh, nothing happens. This just specifies that if we do use quotes, these are the characters that will be used for the opening and closing. So we haven't actually used quotes. Well, to use the quotes that these apply to, it's actually the quote character, the quote element. So there's an opening quote element and a closing quote element. So if we add those and then we save it and we refresh, then that's how they get put in there, was that opening quote and that closing quote. And we specified what type we wanted. If we hadn't, then the browser would have picked its own version of the quote. So whatever its default was. Now let me make that a little bit bigger so we can see what that is. So you can see how those curly quotes are there. Now, if we hadn't specified, let's try to see what the default is, and we can test that by removing this and saving it. And we see that those are just the straight quotes. So we changed the default quote by adding those quotes. Now, I'm going to put this back so we have it the way we want it there, and then it shows up here, but only where we've put those opening and closing Q elements. Well, there's another way to do it. We would have to go in and add those Q elements in every place we wanted them in the HTML, and we just don't want to do that. So we're going to do it a different way. But this gets us started because we've defined what we want our opening and closing quotes to look like.